Hello everyone, I am the Meta Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a commander from Innistrad Crimson Vow, Runo Stromkirk. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. The best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. For just $1, patrons get early access to certain videos on YouTube. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. You can also support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Runo is a 1/4 vampire cleric with flying for 1 generic, 1 blue, and 1 black. When he enters the battlefield, you can top deck a creature card from your graveyard. While this might seem a bit underwhelming, that's because he has another triggered ability slightly tied to this recovery ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may look at and reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature with mana value 6 or greater, Runo transforms into Krothuss, Lord of the Deep, the true commander of the deck. I'm assuming he doesn't really transform into Krothuss, I think he's just summoning it from the deep. Anyways, Krothuss is a 3/5 Kraken horror with flying, which is pretty interesting flavor-wise, having a flying Kraken. Anyways, this Cthulhu-type monstrosity is no joke. Whenever it attacks, you create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of another target attacking creature. Not only is that super busted, but if that creature were a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent, then you create 2 of those tokens instead. This is just insane. Not only will this be amazing for beatdown strategies, but for copying enter the battlefield triggers as well. First things first, we gotta be able to reliably transform Runo into Krothuss. While he might be able to top deck a satisfactory creature from our graveyard, that might require too many hoops to jump through. We should make do with some top deck manipulation instead. Scroll Rack, Sensei's Divining Top, and Jace the Mind Sculptor help us do just that. All we need is to have a fatty on top of our library when it comes to our upkeep. That way we can transform Runo. Either way, all these cards are amazing on their own, especially Jace, who's the most busted Planeswalker card printed to date, no question. To a certain extent, Liliana Vest can also help with transferring Runo because we can just tutor for a fatty to top deck and then pass until our next upkeep. Since we can choose whichever 6+ mana value creature we want, we can actually choose whichever we actually need at that moment from amongst the epic ones we're going to see in a bit. Witch's Cottage is a swamp with the same effect as Runo, so it doesn't take up a slot in the deck. Since it's a swamp, it can also be fetched for in a pinch with 4 of the 7 fetch lands in the deck. Now that we have Krothuss online, we can get to our beatdown with our sea monsters. However, while we can include the best of these 4 creature types to duplicate in the deck, why not just make sure all of our creatures will be any of these types anyways? Maskwood Nexus, Conspiracy, Arcane Adaptation, and Xenograph can make all of our creatures any of these creature types, with the artifact having the added bonus of making all of our creatures every black bordered creature type. The only odd one out of these is Xenograph, which only gives the creature type to our creatures already on the battlefield, while Conspiracy erases every other creature type besides the name one. However, besides Xenograph, the other ones do so in every zone, which is great for effects that reduce cost. One very important thing to note when choosing a creature type with these 3 enchantments is to always choose Kraken as the creature type, but we'll see why in just a bit. As I just mentioned, having them be Krakens in every zone means that Urza's Incubator can reduce their casting cost by 2 generic mana if we also name Kraken as it enters the battlefield. Since the deck has plenty of heavy creatures, being able to reduce their cost is a given. That's why Heartless Summoning and Thryx the Sudden Storm are also included. These don't care about creature types, but Thryx reduces the casting cost of expensive creatures and also makes them uncounterable. It also has flash, so we can cast it at the end of the turn before ours to keep our mana open for responses. The enchantment's downside isn't even that bad since our sea monsters are so big anyways, and reducing all of our creatures' casting cost by 2 generic is too good to pass up, especially at 2 mana to cast. Now, the main reason we choose Kraken for these effects and not any of the other 3 is solely because of spawning Kraken. Since the deck is combat focused, being able to create even more beaters whenever any of our creatures get through is insane. If all of our creatures are Krakens, we're essentially creating that many 9/9s when they hit. In any case, the deck does have a couple of Krakens besides this one and Krothuss, but we'll see those in a bit. Since the deck is aggro, Serpent of Yawning Depths, Suen Xuan Lord of Wu, and Archetype of Imagination help us get through without worrying about chump blockers. The Serpent, similarly to Krothuss, works for any of the 4 sea monster creature types, so if they're all Krakens it still works. Fortunately, Suen Xuan and the Archetype don't care about the creature types. These almost guarantee our creatures are unblockable. Same goes for Stormtide Leviathan. However, not only is this a huge beater that can be twice copied with Krothuss for being a Leviathan, but when combined with Archetype of Imagination, it makes all of our creatures unblockable, plus makes all of our opponent's creatures unable to attack unless they had Island Walk. As a bonus, it also makes all lands islands, which helps us fix colors like Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, which is also in the deck. So we'll never be color screwed with these cards. As for making the most of Krothuss' copying ability, Lithoform Engine and Stranic Resonator can be used to copy it for even more value. Keep in mind that the attacker doesn't have to be a sea monster for Krothuss to copy it. It's just that being a sea monster means being copied twice. But these two artifacts can copy that trigger. So if we were copying a sea monster, we can get a total of 4 token copies from the attacker that are tapped and attacking with either of these artifacts. 6 if we had both of them. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, Sakashima the Imposter, and Spark Double can also help with doubling Krothuss' effect by copying Krothuss itself. The best thing about Sakashima of 1,000 Faces and Spark Double is that, since Krothuss can't target itself, it can target Sakashima and Spark Double even if they're copies of it. Thus, you'll get 2 more copies of Krothuss. Plus, when Sakashima and Spark Double attack, they can target the original or any of the copies, especially Sakashima, since he ignores the legend rule. This gets out of hand very quickly. Panharmonicon is another way to make the most of Krothuss' ability, albeit for the creatures you're copying if they have any enter the battlefield triggers, which are quite plentiful in this deck. The deck is aggro and means to make the most of Krothuss' ability and attacking with sea monsters, but copying creatures with enter the battlefield triggers means copying that effect, which is no joke. Even Runo has an enter the battlefield trigger, so this card will always do work here. Same with Sword of Hearth and Home. The equipped creature does have to connect in order to blink the target creature, but it's another way to re-trigger that enter the battlefield effect. As a bonus, it also gives +2/+2 and protection from 2 colors, so if equipped to Krothuss, you can also make it more dangerous. If that weren't enough, you can ramp for a basic land when the equipped creature connects. Sword of the Animus is included for the same reason, and it's slightly better if what we want is to just ramp, since it triggers on attack, so no need to connect in order to get the basic land into play from our library. As for the deck's legit sea monsters, Brynlin the Moon Kraken, Icebreaker Kraken, and Scourge of Fleets are the ones with enter the battlefield triggers. They are a bit hefty to cast, but at least the deck has ways to reduce casting costs, as well as to generate a ton of mana. Icebreaker Kraken also has a built-in cost reduction effect, which is why the deck is running 11 Snowlands. These enter the battlefield triggers are great since they are incredibly disruptive. We're either freezing things or bouncing things en masse. Not only is this disruptive, but can also clear the way for our huge attackers. Speaking of, Nemesis of Reason and Rexiel the Risen Deep are some more sea monsters, but these care more about attacking than entering the battlefield. The Nemesis is also disruptive by milling 10 cards from the defender, so imagine copying it with Krothuss each combat. You'll be milling out opponents in no time. And it also only costs 5 to cast. Unfortunately, we can't copy Rexiel without Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, but no matter. If we are milling opponents, then its ability is just icing on the cake. If we had Orborg, it can't be blocked because it has Swamp Walk. If we had a Leviathan, then it can't be blocked because it has Island Walk. So good. It can then free cast any instant or sorcery in the defender's graveyard, which doesn't necessarily have to be there because we mulled it away. Storm Surge Kraken and Tidal Kraken are some more beaters, but they're nothing special beyond that. The deck does need some 6+ mana value sea monsters in order to not depend so heavily on the creature type changing effects, as well as being able to transform Runo into Krothuss. That being said, having a 7/7 beater with hexproof and a 6/6 unblockable beater to be able to copy twice per trigger is no joke. These become very dangerous. Coat of Arms is also included due to the aggro nature of the deck, plus we do already have enough sea monsters where this is still good on its own. Keep in mind that we're copying creatures with Krothuss, which then pumps the rest of our creatures by that much. And obviously, it's busted when included with our previously mentioned creature type manipulating effects. Also, notice how almost all the sea monsters previously mentioned are Krakens anyways, just like our commander. As for the other creatures in the deck, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to go full-blown sea monster tribal with Runo, since Krothuss will still copy any attacker regardless of creature type. It's just that being a sea monster is a bonus. This is why the deck is including plenty of big creatures with useful enter the battlefield triggers. First off is Runescar Demon and CDC Undead Vizier, which can help us consistently tutor through our library for responses or anything else we might need. So getting a counterspell in your hand each combat step is incredibly helpful at protecting your board state, especially if you're getting 2 if they're Krakens too. Not only that, but they're also beaters in their own right as well. Unfortunately, only the demon clones will stick around unless you have Sakashima in play. As for Disruption, Duplicant, Noxious Gearhulk, and Vidalcan Dismisser can get rid of blockers or other pesky creatures. The Dismisser is especially oppressive since it top decks the creature, so you can very easily lock an opponent out of advancing by top decking their creature every turn with it, or getting rid of 2 creatures this way if we're copying it twice. Massacre Worm can also do wonders with getting rid of creatures. -2/-2 is no joke, especially against token decks. Copying it multiple times might be enough to wipe opponents' boards of creatures entirely if it came down to it. Being a 6/5 beater is also amazing when we're copying it. Either Snipe, Agent of Treachery, and Meteor Golem also do get rid of things, but do it better since they can hit anything, not just creatures. The Agent is perhaps the better of these 3, since stealing is another way of getting rid of something, but it can also steal lands, which is quite the bonus. And if we control 3 or more permanents we don't own, we get to draw 3 cards at the beginning of our end step, which is just icing on the cake. Great Whale and Peregrine Drake help us out by untapping a significant amount of lands. Not only will copying these allow us to cast a spell before combat, but to then have mana open afterwards for responses and interaction. The Drake isn't that huge, but at least the Whale is a 5/5, which isn't so bad here. A creature equipped with Sword of Feast and Famine hitting an opponent is another way to help us cast these fat spells and still be able to keep mana open to cast our interaction afterwards. As a bonus, the creature gets +2/+2 and protection from 2 relevant colors, so Krothuss loves being equipped with it, and the defending player discards a card as a bonus. Speaking of needing mana to cast our fatties and still be able to keep mana open for resources, Makers of the Coffers, Crypt Ghast, and Nirkana Revenant take advantage of Urborg. Either way, the deck has 11 swamps that are easily ramped for, so they're going to always do some work. The deck does have a high mana curve, but we need a critical mass of big creatures to transform Runo, so we do need ways to balance that with ramp, cost reduction, and mana acceleration. Besides, copying any of the last two will have our swamps tap for a ton of mana. The following cards in the deck are the essential card advantage, responses, and mana acceleration of any deck. We definitely need to protect our board state from Wraths, Maths Bounce, Exile, and negative toughness effects. Pact of Negation, Fierce Guardianship, Swan Song, Negate, Counterspell, and Mana Drain is decent enough suite of counter magic to this effect. Board wipes are commonplace in non-CDH pods, but as long as we don't overextend ourselves, we can be rebuilt fairly quickly. Also, with the repeatable tutor effects, we can always have at least one of these in our hand just in case. Cyclonic Rift is included for when we want to wipe the board but be in control of it. Not every board wipe is bad, but this will help us out in a pinch, so it's always good to include, especially if we can tutor for it. Or we can just draw into our interaction thanks to Blue Sun Zenith, Commander's Insight, Diviner's Portent, Drawn in Dreams, and Stroke of Genius. If we are untapping our lands and ramping like crazy, then we can potentially sink all of our mana into one of these spells at the beginning of the end step before ours in order to keep our hand full of responses or monsters to cast in order to keep pressure on the board, while also keeping some standby in order to not overextend ourselves. Thought Vessel and Reliquary Tower are included because these don't really take up a slot in a non-green deck, plus we'll be having hands most of the time that are really big, so they're good regardless. Cabal Coffers, Cabal Stronghold, and Lake of the Dead help us make the most out of Urborg as well as the other swamps in the deck. While the Stronghold is nerfed Coffers, it'll still count basic islands that are also swamps, so it's not so bad. Nykthos Shrine to Nyx is also crazy good here considering how many permanents have a ton of either blue or black mana symbols, so this is bound to tap for a ton of mana. Keep in mind that copy tokens copy every aspect of the card including mana cost, so those copy tokens will also increase our devotion. Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, and Arcane Signet require no further explanation to their inclusion other than being ubiquitous for non-green decks such as this one. We don't need a lot of mana to cast Runo, but we do need a lot of mana to cast our sea monsters and other fatties. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running all 7 fetch lands: Underground Sea, Watery Grave, Sunken Hollow, Fetid Pools, Ice Tunnel, Drowned Catacomb, Tainted Isle, Sunken Ruins, Shipwreck Marsh, Command Tower, and Ancient Tomb, as well as 5 of each snow-covered basic lands for all of the land-based ramp effects in the deck, as well as having the snow lands for Icebreaker Kraken. As with all of my deck techs, you don't need to run the more expensive mana pieces like Underground Sea, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Lake of the Dead, Ancient Tomb, etc. if you don't already have them, won't proxy them, or aren't playing online. You can easily swap them out for budget substitutes and the deck will still run well enough. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Runo Stromkirk. While you can definitely go full-blown sea monster tribal and have a more casual deck, I decided to make the most out of Krothuss' effect in order to not just copy huge beaters, but also those huge beaters with useful enter the battlefield triggers. This deck not only hits hard, but also makes sure we do hit hard, but stopping anything that gets in our way. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Meta Kirby, and happy brewing.